It's Worldview Wednesday.
Are we just gene machines dancing to our DNA?
Is it goo to you by way of the zoo? Check out our conversations about God, the beginning, evolution, and all that fun stuff. So our question today is, do you believe in evolution?
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 There's microevolution, which are adaptations within species, and then there's macroevolution, which refers to kind of what they would teach here at the university, where everything came from one common ancestor. Every species, everything we see around here was from one source.
I do.
Why?
I think we have enough scientific proof that it happened. So
What is the most compelling argument from the scientific proof?
we have fossils that are, there before Christ. So I think that we've evolved from, basically pre-humans, Neanderthals.
Do I believe in evolution? Yes.
Why is that?
It's just something I've learned about for a long time, and there seems to be a lot of scientific evidence to back it up, I think. Okay. So,
What would you say is the most compelling piece of evidence to back it up?
isn't it like Darwin's theory of evolution, like just all the like similarities between the evolution of different mammals and stuff, vertebrates and stuff like that?
I'd say macroevolution. I don't believe. And then I guess species can evolve with get better at things, but I don't think. I mean, probably not. Probably not for the most part with evolution.
How did you come to that conclusion?
I don't know. It doesn't. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know. Doesn't seem likely. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Why?
There's a lot of science behind it, so a lot of research. Yeah. So I would say yes.
What do you think is the most compelling argument for evolution?
Oh wow. Okay. I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, like fossils and studies of that, I would say.
I'm not educated enough on the matter to have an opinion. Okay. I believe, not trying to sound like very radical right now, but I believe that God created the earth and the beings within. So I do believe to an extent. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah.
Why do you think people should believe in God? What's the most compelling argument for God creating the world?
I mean, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
This is
a hard question.
It is really hard. I believe from like a young age, and I've witnessed God's movement through my own life, and I read His Word, and I have faith.
Yeah.
So.
I definitely agree with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think it's a little more complex than just saying coming from one common ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely believe in evolution theory. Yeah.
Okay, so what is your most compelling argument that you would say for evolution?
Well, I would say based on the science of it. We learn in school all about the different tracks of it, and basically how you can trace everything back to basically the water and having the right environment for which life started, having all those macromolecules and all that. I think it's interesting because on a spiritual level, I'm definitely more of a creationalist as well. But I think it's funny because if you look at the creation story, a lot of it pairs up very nice with what evolution is. If you look at what was made on the first day and second day and third day and all of that, it pretty much almost mirrors evolution and what we know it to be.
You would say we have a common ancestor. It all started at one thing.
I'm not sure about that, but yes, common ancestors. I don't know if it's one ancestor or multiple common ancestors. I don't know. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we go all the way back to that, where does that common ancestor or ancestors, where does that come from?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Would you say that something can come from nothing, or that it's more logical for something to come from something?
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, kind of. I would say something to come from something else, not
Okay.
from nothing.
Yeah.
But it had to come from nothing at some point, I guess. Right?
I don't know. It depends. Can something come from nothing ever?
It's pretty abstract. Let me see.
Do you mind if I provide my perspective?
Sure,
Just to
that would
give you
help
my
me
thoughts?
out. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would
Keep me going here.
I would say it's more logical to say that something came from something rather than something came from nothing, because we look around, we don't see that in anything. We have the law of causality. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. We say the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So we would say, okay, now we have to figure out what is that cause. So do you have any idea or any beliefs about what that cause could be?
Don't they say like the Big Bang Theory was like the thing that started everything?
Yeah, but what caused the Big Bang?
Isn't it universe expansion or something like that? I don't know.
Can the universe create itself?
I don't know. Apparently it did at some point, right?
So we would go back to the law. Sorry. We would go back to the law of causality that says
Okay.
whatever begins to exist has a cause. So whatever created the universe needs to be outside of the universe. It needs to be timeless, spaceless, and material. It needs to be infinite. So because the universe is not defined as that, it can't create itself.
What did you think on that?
That makes sense to me. Yeah,
Makes sense.
something can't come from nothing. There has to be something for it to come from.
What do you think that ultimate thing could be?
It's
Oh my
infinite.
god.
Outside of time, outside of space.
You mean the something that everything came from?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, do you also mind if I provide my perspective again? So we would say that it's God. We would say that God fits all those categories, that nothing else fits all those categories. We're trying to get to that basic question of, okay, where did it all start? Because it can't start itself, because we just talked about how something can't come from nothing. It has to come from something, and it can't create itself, because we don't see that anywhere.
Yes.
Why?
Because I feel like it makes more sense than, or I feel like there's enough scientific background to explain how like there were slight transitions and mutations from like species to species that we can see over time that makes sense how different things evolved.
What do you think is the most compelling argument for macro from coming from one ancestor, if you believe in that?
I feel like there are always like different DNA sequences. Like if you look at it like long term, we all almost have at least one or two things that are like similar, that if you just like go back and change, even if you look at it even like micro, you can see where things switched over time. So if you just kind of like look at that on a big step, you can see that it's not that hard to see that it could be a big macro step that just happened over time.
Where do you think that our original ancestor came from, and what do you think that is?
Oof. Do you mean as humans or do you mean as like animals altogether?
Where do you think it began?
I'd say it'd probably come from something like underwater, or like some water-based, like acid, or like some water-based form of some sort, and then evolved onto land after more water came.
How do you think it formed in the water?
I don't remember my bio class. I think it was like the combustion. I think it was like the combustion of like molecules, like the heat and then the pressure of different like electricity that was like coming and hitting the earth. So like the heat of that, but I feel like part of it was random, but part of it was like something that just had to like change, or like the snap of like molecules and stuff. I know.
You know. So I have another question for you. We're just gonna keep going back. Where did the water come from?
Oh wait. I don't know.
These are hard questions.
I know these are hard questions. I would say the water came from maybe like different gases could have been brought after like the collisions hit from, I guess, meteorites or asteroids. So like different.
Where did the meteorites come from?
Oh no. If I say space, are you gonna ask me where space came from? Space.
Where do you think it all started?
Oh no. I just feel like I don't have enough. I don't have enough backing. I barely know about molecules to know where the whole universe came from.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, I'll tell you a little bit about what we believe. So, we would say that something can't come from nothing. It came from something. It had to come from something. The beginning of the universe, the water. Bye, Joe. The universe, the planets, had to come from something that was outside of space and time that's always existed, that had no beginning and has no end. We would say that's God. And so we would say that from the evidence that we have found and from the research that we have done, that he's the one who put the water into place. And then we can talk about evolution, macroevolution, but we would say that he is the source of all things. So. Hello, guys. So today we talked to a lot of people who believed in evolution, and when we asked them why, they said scientific evidence or fossils. But when we asked them the specifics, they weren't really sure what they were. And so they were kind of going off of what they had heard from authority or what they had learned in school.
Yeah, as you probably saw on the video, nobody came up with specific, detailed evidence for proof of macroevolution. So what we were trying to do is say, okay, well, then direct it back to where did the universe come from? We talked about the cosmological argument. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Kalam cosmological argument, which says everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Lauren, what does that cause have to be?
Someone who is outside of time, space, and material, and we would say that's God, the intelligent designer, and the one who has always been and who will always be.
So we think it's more logical that something came from something rather than something coming from nothing. So that's what we were emphasizing today, and I think we got through to a few people.
Yeah.
We put some stones in some shoes.
We did.